I always believed my marriage to Melissa was as solid as steel. We had been through so much together, sleepless nights in a tiny rented apartment, the struggle of saving every dollar, and the moment we finally bought our own home. We were the couple our friends envied. I was sure we were a team, that she was my better half. But one day, something changed. At first, it was small things. She started coming home later, blaming it on new tasks from the boss. New passwords appeared on her phone. She stopped meeting my eyes during dinner, and her smile became forced. One evening I came home earlier than usual and found Melissa standing by the window, lost in her phone. She didn't notice me until I got closer. When I asked who she was talking to, she quickly locked her screen and gave me the usual answer. Just a friend. But something in her voice put me on edge. Later that night, when she had fallen asleep, I couldn't resist. I picked up her phone. But the password had changed. For the first time in 10 years, she was hiding something from me. The next day, during lunch, I received a message from a mutual acquaintance. Saw your wife at a restaurant last night. Who's the guy? My stomach twisted into a knot. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the location tracking app we both used for safety. She wasn't at work like she had said. She had lied to me. That evening, for the first time, I looked at her and felt a chill. How long had this been going on? Had she ever truly loved me? I was going to get answers. But I had no idea those answers would shatter everything I believed in. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Melissa breathed steadily beside me, completely unaware that her secret was no longer safe. I didn't wake her. I didn't make a scene. Anger burned inside me, but I knew if I wanted the truth, I had to be smart about it. The next morning, as she got ready for work, I watched her in silence. She slipped into a tight dress I had never seen before, applied makeup, and spritzed on perfume, something she rarely did on weekday mornings. You look great, I said, keeping my voice neutral. She flashed a quick smile, one that no longer felt genuine. Thanks. Big meeting today. I nodded, but inside I had already made my decision. As soon as she walked out the door, I grabbed my phone and opened the tracking app. I rarely used it. We had never given each other a reason to. But now things were different. The dot on the map showed that she was heading downtown, but not toward her office building. I grabbed my keys and followed. When I arrived, I watched from a distance as she stepped into an upscale restaurant, the same one where we had celebrated our wedding anniversary years ago. But today, she wasn't there with me. I parked nearby and waited. 10 minutes. 20. 30. And then, finally, the doors swung open. I saw her step out, hand in hand with someone. A man. Tall. Impeccably groomed. Dressed in an expensive suit with a smug smile on his face. He leaned in, whispered something in her ear, and she laughed, the same laugh that once belonged only to me. My world tilted. They stopped by his car, and without hesitation, Melissa leaned in and kissed him. I barely held myself back from storming over. But this was only the beginning. I needed more. More proof. More time. Because if she thought she would walk away from this without consequences, she was very, very wrong. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Right in front of me, my wife, the woman I had given 10 years of my life to, was kissing another man. She wasn't hesitating, she wasn't hiding. I wanted to storm out, drag her down from this pedestal of lies, make her look me in the eyes and confess. But I held back. For the first time in years, I realized that emotions could ruin everything. I needed a clear plan. I waited until they left, then drove home. Melissa walked in later that evening. Her hair was slightly tousled, her lipstick faint, as if hastily reapplied in a car. How was your day? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Oh, exhausting, she sighed, dropping her bag on the couch. That meeting dragged on for hours. Actually, do you mind if I head to bed early? I'm just really tired. Tired? I almost laughed. She had no idea that I knew. that I had seen. Of course, I said. She kissed me on the cheek, short, cold, like someone completing a meaningless ritual. Then, she walked to the bedroom. I stood in the living room, gripping my phone. I had his number. I had looked him up, David Gorman, business consultant, divorced, no kids. A man who thought he could just take what belonged to someone else and get away with it. If only they knew what I had planned. I sat down, opening our family calendar on my phone. My parents were hosting a party in 3 days. The perfect moment for payback. That's when she'd realize I wasn't just going to sit back and accept her betrayal. I'd make sure she remembered that day for the rest of her life. The next morning, Melissa acted like nothing had happened. She smiled, sipped her coffee at the kitchen table, and casually chatted about something insignificant from work. I sat across from her, nodding at the right moments, but all I could see was the image of her lips on another man's. "By the way, babe," she said, almost offhandedly, "your parents' party is this weekend. You remember, right?" "Yeah," I said, watching her closely. She hesitated for a moment before dropping the bombshell. "I want to bring a guest." I barely kept my expression neutral. "Oh? Who?" I asked, taking a slow sip of coffee. "David." She didn't even flinch. She just sat there and said it as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "David?" I repeated, as if I hadn't heard her right. "Yeah." She crossed her arms, exhaling like this was difficult for her. "Look, I don't want there to be secrets between us. I've thought about this a lot, and I want to be honest with you." "Honest?" I nearly laughed in her face. "What do you mean?" She looked at me like she was explaining something obvious to a child. "David and I, we're together, Ethan. I wanted to tell you sooner, but you're a good man, and I didn't want to hurt you." She didn't want to hurt me. She had kissed another man, lied to me, planned to parade him in front of my family, and she didn't want to hurt me? "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Yes." She dropped her gaze, faking remorse. "We've grown apart, Ethan. I love you, but not the way I used to. I want to be honest and move forward openly." I didn't answer. I just stared at her, cold and unreadable. Did she really think she could just do this? That I would swallow her betrayal, let her bring him to my parents' party, and do nothing? She had no idea what she was getting herself into. I forced myself to nod. "If that's how you feel, okay." She smiled, as if relieved. "Thank you, Ethan. I knew you'd understand." Oh, I understood. She just didn't know what I understood. And that I had already started taking action. As soon as she left for work, I sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her half-finished cup of coffee. I felt disgusted. Not just by the betrayal itself, though that hurt. I was disgusted by her audacity. She wasn't even trying to hide it. No, she was flaunting it, as if she was certain I'd just accept it. That I'd accept that my home was no longer mine. That my life was nothing more than a rug for her to wipe her feet on. She hadn't just betrayed me. She wanted to humiliate me. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Mark Wheeler, attorney. Mark had been a close friend since college. We hadn't talked much lately, but I knew if I ever needed help, he wouldn't hesitate. I hit the call button. "Ethan! Holy hell, man, it's been forever!" I didn't waste time. "Mark, I need legal advice. Immediately." "Whoa, sounds serious. Business related?" "No. It's my wife." Silence on the other end. "She cheated on you?" "Yes," I said through clenched teeth. "But that's not all. She's bringing her lover to a family party." "What the?" Mark sounded as shocked as I wanted Melissa to be in the coming days. "All right. Tell me what you need." "I want everything. I want her broke, homeless, and humiliated. I want to make this as painful for her as possible." Mark thought for a moment. "All right. You need to act fast. First, do you have joint accounts?" Yes, but most of our money is in my personal one. Good. Transfer everything out of the joint account. Lock her out. I wrote it down. Next, the house. Whose name is on the deed? Mine. Perfect. She has no legal claim to it if you can prove infidelity. I have proof. Even better. And one last thing. Mark paused. You want this to be big, right? Massive. He chuckled darkly. Then let's make it a show. I hung up, a small, grim smile creeping onto my face. Melissa thought she was in control. But she didn't realize I was already holding her entire life in my hands. I moved fast. The moment I hung up with Mark, I transferred every last dollar from our joint account into my personal one. Within minutes, her card balance dropped to zero. I could already picture her face when she tried to pay for something after work. Next, the house. I called a real estate agent and started the process of legally ensuring that Melissa had no claim to the property. On paper, I could kick her out any time I wanted. But I was saving that for later. For now, I had something even better planned. If she wanted a spectacle in front of my family, she was going to get one. Then, Mark gave me another interesting piece of information. My rival, David Gorman, wasn't as perfect as he seemed. He was recently divorced, or so Melissa thought. In reality, his divorce wasn't finalized. Legally, he was still married. You think his wife will cooperate? I asked Mark. Oh, absolutely. He laughed. You have no idea how badly she wants to screw him over. We reached out to her. Her name was Lauren, and when I told her that her husband was taking my wife to a family event as his official date, she was, let's just say, very interested in justice. He told me we still had a chance. Her voice trembled with rage. And now he's sleeping with a married woman and flaunting it? If you'd like, I offered, you can come to the party. And see his face when he realizes I'm there? She paused, then said, I'll be there. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Now, all I had to do was wait for the party. And then, all hell would break loose. The day of the party arrived. I had never needed to hide my emotions as much as I did that morning. I played the part of the man who had surrendered, the man who had accepted the humiliation unfolding before his very eyes. But inside, cold, calculated rage simmered beneath the surface. Melissa acted as if everything was settled. She got ready with extra care, styling her hair to perfection, choosing a dress that accentuated her figure. This wasn't just a casual family gathering for her, it was a public debut with her new partner, an official introduction. It never crossed her mind that this evening would turn into a disaster. Ready? She asked with a sweet smile as we stepped outside to the car. Absolutely, I said, keeping my tone as light as a man who had already given up. She took her seat in the passenger seat, and I started the engine. But in reality, everything was already set in motion. The party. My parents' house was filled with family and close friends. The atmosphere was warm, filled with familiar faces and cheerful conversations. I stood with a glass of whiskey in hand, waiting, watching. Then Melissa entered the living room, hand in hand with David. She held on to him firmly, making it clear to everyone that he was now her partner. A few friends exchanged glances. Some already knew about the situation, but for many, this was the first time they were seeing it unfold. Ethan! My brother, Tom, appeared beside me, his voice low. Is this for real? She brought him here? I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. What are you going to do? I smirked. Watch and enjoy. The first blow. Melissa approached me with David at her side. Her expression was smug, almost condescending. Ethan, I want you to meet David, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. I think you two should talk. I extended my hand. David Gorman, right? He nodded and shook my hand. Nice to meet you. I hope we can be civil. Oh, I have no doubt, I said smoothly. By the way, how's your wife doing? His face changed instantly. Melissa tensed beside him. What? She murmured. I pretended not to notice their reactions and turned to the guests. Friends, it turns out our guest, David, is still legally married. But it seems he forgot to mention that. Silence fell over the room. And then, right on cue, the front door opened. Lauren. His wife. Her eyes burned with fury. David took a step back, his face strained of color. "What are you doing here?" he croaked. "Same as you, sweetheart." Her voice dripped with venom. "Meeting new people." Melissa instantly dropped his hand. The guests remained silent, eyes darting between the unfolding drama. I took a slow sip of my whiskey, savoring the first act of my show. But this was just the beginning. Melissa's face went pale, her confident smile vanishing. She turned to David, searching his eyes for some kind of denial. But his silence told the truth. His perfect, smug facade cracked. "David," her voice trembled. "That's not true, right?" He didn't answer. Lauren took a step closer, glancing at me for a split second, acknowledging my part in this, before turning to Melissa. "You thought he was single, didn't you?" she said, her voice cold as steel. "That you were special. You lied to me?" Melissa hissed, her hands clenching into fists. David swallowed hard. "It's complicated," he muttered. "Complicated?" Melissa spun toward me, fury lighting up her face. "You set this up, didn't you?" I raised my glass and took another sip. "I'm sorry, I thought you wanted everything to be honest and open," I said smoothly. "Isn't that what you told me?" She looked like she wanted to hit me. I didn't know." Her voice cracked. "David told me it was all settled." "Oh, it's not settled," Lauren interrupted, crossing her arms. "His signature is still on our legal documents. And fun fact," she smirked at me, "I'm a lawyer. So trust me, sweetheart, this divorce is far from over." The murmurs started among the guests. "What a disgrace." "This is insane, wow, what a mess." David stood frozen, staring at the floor, as if willing it to swallow him whole. Melissa's breath hitched. Her face flushed red, then paled again. She looked around and realized everyone was watching. No sympathy. No support. And then she did exactly what I expected. She snapped. "You set me up." She pointed a shaking finger at me. I shrugged. "I simply revealed the truth, Melissa. The same thing you wanted to do to me. I just got there first." She clenched her jaw. "You think you won? That you humiliated me?" I tilted my head. "No. I'm just getting started." Then I gave Tom a subtle nod. He pressed a button on a remote. And the big screen in the center of the room lit up. A video began playing. Melissa and David. Together. At the same restaurant where I first saw them. He kissed her hand, she laughed. Then, the scene changed, they entered a hotel room. Gasps filled the room. Melissa whirled around, eyes burning with hatred. You. I finished my drink calmly. Me? She was shaking with rage. David, who had just been publicly humiliated, was now looking at her differently. "You told me you were trapped in this marriage." His voice was cold. "That you were forced to stay." Melissa faltered. I smiled. "You see, Melissa, betrayal has a funny way of hitting everyone involved." She had no words left. She just stood there, trapped under the weight of every single judging stare in the room. And I sat back, enjoying my moment of victory. But this wasn't the end. Melissa stood frozen. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Her eyes darted between me, David, and the screen, which had just finished exposing her lies to everyone. The video ended. The room was silent. I exhaled deeply and set down my glass. "I think that's enough," I said calmly. "Or maybe not." I pulled out my phone and opened a folder. "I have something else." Screenshots of her messages with David over the past few months. You'd be shocked, folks, at the kind of filth she wrote about me while we were still living together. Melissa gasped. "Ethan, don't you dare." I lifted my gaze. Oh? But you wanted an open relationship, right? Why does this bother you now? She lunged at me, trying to snatch the phone from my hands, but I was quicker. I stepped back. All right. I won't ruin the mood any further. I'll keep it simple. I turned to the guests. All of you know that Melissa and I were together for 10 years. But what you don't know is that she didn't just cheat. She lied to everyone. She lied to me, to her family, to her friends. And when she finally decided to leave, she did it in the worst way possible. I glanced at David. She lied to you too? His brows furrowed, but he stayed silent. And you know what, Melissa? I turned back to her. You were right. Our marriage was doomed. But not because of me. Because you were always looking for something better instead of appreciating what you had. Her hands balled into fists. And now what? Her voice shook. You think this is your victory? You feel better after this little show? I studied her for a long moment. You know what the best part is? I leaned in slightly. You've lost everything, and I'm just getting started. Then I revealed my final move. I filed for divorce. I said clearly so everyone could hear. The house is mine. Your bank accounts? Empty. As of today, you're on your own. Her eyes widened. What? Did you think you'd keep living here? That we'd split everything 50-50? I shook my head. You lost before you even started this game. Her chest rose and fell sharply. She was humiliated, crushed, destroyed. And then, something happened that even I didn't expect. She spun around, and slapped David across the face. This is all your fault. She screamed. If you had just told me the truth. He raised his hands as if surrendering. Hey! It's not my fault you thought I was your savior. And you? She whirled back to me, rage blazing in her eyes. You think you won? I gave her a calm smile. No, Melissa. I just don't lose anymore. She stood there, breathing heavily for a few more seconds. Then, she did the only thing left. She ran. I watched her go, feeling neither joy nor euphoria, just peace. She chose this path. And now she had to walk it, without me. Melissa bolted out of the house, slamming the door so hard that the glasses in the living room rattled. The guests remained silent. Some were in shock, others were clearly entertained, and a few even clapped discreetly. David looked lost. His usual smugness had vanished, and a red mark from her slap still burned on his cheek. Lauren caught his eye and smirked. Guess you're not my problem anymore. She threw me a quick glance, a small nod, her way of saying thank you, before disappearing into the crowd. I took a sip of whiskey and turned back to the guests. Well, I said, sorry for the unexpected show. But now that the circus is over, let's get back to celebrating. Laughter rippled through the room, and the tension began to ease. My brother Tom walked up and clapped a hand on my shoulder. That was legendary. That was necessary. I corrected him. I knew this victory had cost me a lot, years of my life, emotions, trust. But it was worth every second. The aftermath. The next morning, I returned home. And the first thing I saw was Melissa, sitting on the front steps. Her eyes were red, her makeup smudged. She looked like she hadn't slept all night. Ethan, she whispered as I approached. I stopped, crossing my arms. What do you want? She lifted her tear-streaked face to mine. Are you really throwing me out? I stayed silent, just looking at her. Please! Her voice cracked. I made a mistake. I was stupid. Yeah, you were. I agreed. But that's not my problem anymore. Her lips trembled. I have nowhere to go. That's not true, I said coldly. You have him. She shut her eyes and shook her head. He left me. I barely suppressed a smirk. Told you, betrayal tends to backfire on everyone. She inhaled sharply, fists clenching. I messed everything up, didn't I? Yep. She looked up at me again, searching for even the smallest trace of sympathy. What if we tried again? She whispered. I tilted my head, studying her like a stranger. And what, Melissa? You think I'll just forget? You think you can erase everything you did? I loved you, she murmured. And now you don't? She didn't answer. I chuckled. See, that's the problem. You always want more. But you never appreciate what you have. I pulled my keys from my pocket. And right now, you have nothing. I stepped past her, unlocked the door, and walked inside, leaving her behind. Melissa was no longer a part of my life. And I felt no anger. No regret. Just freedom. I shut the door behind me, leaving Melissa outside. Somewhere deep inside I expected to feel at least a shred of guilt, a flicker of doubt. But there was nothing. I simply stood in my home, a home that was finally free of her things, her lies, her presence. And it was the best I had felt in months. After a few minutes, I peeked through the window. She was still sitting on the steps, her head lowered. Maybe she thought I'd changed my mind, that I'd come outside, say something that would make everything go back to the way it was. But that was never going to happen. I stepped onto the back patio, lit the cigar I had been saving for a special occasion, and inhaled deeply, savoring the crisp morning air. My phone vibrated. A message from Mark. Divorce officially filed. She gets nothing. Congrats, man. I smirked and typed back. Thanks. I'll celebrate. The final blow. An hour later, Melissa was gone. I had no idea where she went, and I didn't care. But her suffering was just beginning. Over the next few days, she tried texting me. First, long-winded apologies. Then accusations. Eventually, desperate pleas to meet. I ignored them all. Then the messages from mutual friends started rolling in. Heard what happened? Harsh, but fair. She's telling everyone you destroyed her. But honestly, she did it to herself. David is now a legend among scumbags. His wife filed for divorce, and his business is losing clients fast. Yes, his reputation had taken a hit too. But I didn't care. I moved on. And the more time passed, the more I understood one simple truth. Revenge isn't just an action. It's an art. And I had created my masterpiece. Weeks passed. I had almost forgotten about Melissa. Almost. She vanished from my life just as quickly as her dignity had that night. Friends told me she was struggling to find a place to live, that David hadn't even let her stay with him, and that most of our mutual acquaintances wanted nothing to do with her. I felt no pity. But then, one evening, as I pulled into my driveway after work, I saw her again. She was waiting by my car. Exhausted. Pale. Her eyes sunken. Her hair disheveled, her face bare of any makeup. For the first time in years, she looked ordinary. Ethan, she said softly. I stopped a few feet away, crossing my arms. What do you want? She nervously bit her lip. I just want to talk. I sighed. We have nothing to talk about, Melissa. Please. She stepped closer, as if afraid I'd just walk away. Just give me a minute. I waited. I know I messed up, she began. I know I ruined everything. I thought I'd find something better, but... She took a shaky breath. You were right. I never appreciated what I had. Her words didn't move me. I simply stared at her, silent. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Her voice wavered. But please, just tell me I meant something to you. I shook my head. You were a part of my life once, Melissa. Once. But now, you mean nothing to me. She pressed her lips together. I saw the way that answer broke her. She had been expecting something else, some sign that she still mattered, that she still had a chance. But she didn't. She turned away and walked off. No goodbyes. No tears. And that was her final exit from my life. When the door closed behind her, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was as if a long, exhausting chapter of my life had finally ended. I no longer thought about her. No longer worried about what she might do next, no longer waited for another attempt at begging for forgiveness or offering empty explanations. It was over. The days that followed were filled with a peace I hadn't felt in years. I woke up without a weight on my chest. Ate breakfast, listened to music, came home at night, and didn't feel the emptiness I had expected. That emptiness was just space for something new. The first change. For the first time in years, I decided to do something I had always put off. Work, stability, routine, it had kept me in a cage, one I had built for myself. I had always chased security, never allowing myself to take risks. And where had that gotten me? A failed marriage? A trust shattered beyond repair? I didn't want to live that way anymore. That weekend, I packed a suitcase, bought a plane ticket, and left. No plan. No return date. Freedom. I sat in a small cafe by the ocean, breathing in the salty air, smiling to myself. I belonged to no one but myself now. No one controlled my life anymore. No one played with my emotions or treated me like a backup plan. And I realized something simple. It was better to be alone than to be with someone who never truly valued me. That was my victory. As for her, she was nothing more than a memory. Forever. Time passed. I learned to enjoy life without the constant stress of monitoring someone's actions, without waiting for betrayal, without second-guessing every word spoken to me. I traveled. I met new people. I experienced things I had always wanted to but never allowed myself to. Melissa was no longer a part of my world. But somehow, the world wasn't done with her. One day, I received a message from an old friend. She was asking about you. I stared at the text for a long time before replying. Why? Not sure. She said she regrets everything. I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just indifference. But for her, things clearly weren't that simple. A meeting with the past. Weeks later, I ran into her by chance. It was an evening in the city. I had just stepped out of a restaurant when I heard her voice. Ethan. I turned. She stood a few feet away, looking different, exhausted, uncertain, stripped of the confidence she once carried. It's been a while, she said with a weak smile, though her eyes revealed something else entirely. Yeah, I replied simply. She hesitated for a moment, then said, You look happy. I nodded. I am. It was the truth. Her lips trembled slightly. I was a fool. I know. She took a shaky breath. Ethan, if I could go back. I met her gaze. You can't. She exhaled sharply, as if she had expected that answer. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I nodded. I forgive you. For a moment, her eyes lit up with hope. Does that mean? Nothing. I cut her off. It just means I don't hold a grudge. But our past is just that, the past. Her lips pressed together, trying to hide the pain. So you'll never? No. I smiled. We're done. She swallowed hard, then nodded. Then? I wish you the best, Ethan. I didn't reply. I simply walked away, leaving her behind, where she belonged. The final end. My story with her was over. No more anger. No more need for revenge. I was just living. And she? She finally understood the truth. But far too late. I walked down the street, inhaling the crisp night air, reflecting on how much my life had changed. Not long ago, I never would have imagined that I could go through this and come out stronger. Now I was free. But thoughts of Melissa didn't disappear instantly. Not because I regretted anything. Not because I wanted her back. I just kept wondering, could this story have ended differently? What if she hadn't cheated? What if we had talked sooner? What if she had valued what she had? Would I be a different man now? I let myself dwell on these questions for exactly 10 minutes. Then I realized, there was no point in guessing what could have been. There was only what is. The last message. Later that night, my phone vibrated. Melissa, I don't know why I'm writing this. I just wanted to say, I still love you. I stared at the words. Once, they would have broken me. Now, they meant nothing. I calmly deleted the message. She had lost her chance. And I no longer lived in the past. The next morning, I woke up feeling light. No heavy thoughts, no doubt, no lingering pain. I didn't reply to her message. I didn't analyze it, didn't search for hidden meaning. It was simple, she no longer had any place in my life. I stepped onto my balcony, breathed in the fresh air, and smiled. The past was over. From that day on, I never heard from Melissa again. I never asked about her, never wondered how she was doing, never searched for any updates. She had made her choices. And I had made mine. I reclaimed the life I had always put on hold. I pursued the things that truly interested me. I traveled, met new people, and experienced the world in a way I never had before. And then I understood something simple. The best revenge is living well. Not wasting time on those who never valued you. Not letting the past control your future. Simply being happy. And I was happy. Without her. The end.